On this episode, we are going to start stripping the front end to get it ready for stitch welding. That's just taking all the seam sealer off, hitting it with a couple of wire wheels, and starting to get it just prepped to actually start welding it. So since the last video you saw me disassemble the motor all the way down back to a bare block, I still have to bring it to the machine shop to get it honed and decked and a couple other things to get it looked at. I still have to order parts for it, and while all those things are happening, I am going to start working on the front of the car, stitch welding it, making it look a little prettier. We're going to paint it, do a couple line tucks and things like that, just to make it overall look a little bit better. And then once we're done with the front, I'm going to go into the cabin, take the seats out and everything, and begin to stitch weld that as well. So now I'm going to basically give you just a little parts list of all you need to do stitch welding in the front and also in the car. It's all pretty much the same. So I will get to that now. Okay, so if you ever pull your motor out, I would always recommend you do this thin. It makes it a whole lot easier. You're going to have the room that you need to be able to get into some of these spots that you normally can't even get close to with the motor. But you want to start off by obviously just trying to make as much room as possible, get things out of the way. When I do mine, I'm not going to pull out my brake lines and some things like that, just because it's more hassle than it's worth, I think. But I am going to remove the power steering reservoir and lines, as well as like my igniter coil and things like that. And then we'll start to clean it up. Alright, so this is normally the part when I would tell someone to roll their car out and get a pressure washer and pressure wash the inside. Now that like kind of everything's out of the way, don't spray the electrics or the electronical stuff, obviously. But just to get a lot of the grime and stuff off. I don't have a pressure washer at this moment, so I've just gone and wiped down most of the engine bay and everything with just some degreaser and cleaned it off a little bit until I can get the pressure washer. But I'm just going to skip into actually taking the seam sealer off, which is pretty simple, just using the tools that I already set to use. Okay, so to get the seam sealer off that you see right here, the most simple way that I found to get it off was to either get the hook or the pick out of the hook and pick set that you get, and you could also do it with a flat blade screwdriver, but I think the pick and the hook just go in a little bit easier. And you literally just try to break a piece off and just feed it up. So I don't know if you can see, but right here I was able to get the pick underneath it and just start to push it up, and it actually peels the seam sealer out of that little crack that they have there where they put the two seams of metal together. I'll normally run and do this over the whole thing then come back with the flat blade and just scrape it all out. And then I'll come in with the angle grinder and the wire wheel last, and that'll clean it all up real nice and then clean it for welding. Alright, so as you can see, after going through with just the pick and the screwdriver, the flat blade screwdriver and the hammer, just tapping it, all of the seam sealer, most of the seam sealer is all out of this whole line already. So now what I normally do is I take like the pick and I go through and get some of the little chunks out that I can get out, and then hit it with the wire wheel last, which I'll show you now. Now that I hit it with the wire wheel and the grinder, you can see it took it all the way down to the metal, and I don't know if it'll show up in the camera, but it took out all of the seam sealer. Like the little tiny bits that you can't scrape off, it took all of that off. So that all that's left to do is to clean it with whatever chemical you're going to use to clean, like acetone or whatever, and then it's literally ready to be welded after marking it. But I'm going to do the entire car just like that, and then I'll come back when it's time to weld. Now that most of the seam sealer is out of the cracks from us using the angle grinder with the wire wheel and the drill with the little wire wheel attachment and the hooks and the picks and things like that, I'm actually going to go in with acetone now and clean up all of the cracks to get all of the little dirt and grease and whatever else is in there that isn't going to come off with the wire wheel. And you'd be surprised about how much actually will still come off even though it looks perfectly clean. And if you leave it there, when you start to weld, it'll spatter. And using flux cord spatters enough, so you want to cut down on that as much as you can. Alright, so just a little tip, when you go to start cleaning them, don't use the gloves that you're going to be welding with. I have my little pair of gloves that I like to do things with, and from personal experience I can tell you that's a terrible idea, because if you get acetone all over your gloves and you go to weld, they will catch on fire. So that being said, you don't want to use your bare hands either, because you don't really want acetone all over your hands and soaking into your skin, but you also don't want to get the grease and dirt and everything else coming off of your hands, just the oils, to get into where you're cleaning, because that defeats the purpose of what you're doing. So just use like a regular pair of gloves, like you can get a box of them at the store, and I recommend you use those. You can clean, they're clean when you start to use them. You can clean everything up real good, and then just go ahead, throw them away, and then use your other gloves and not have to worry about catching on fire or contaminating what you're about to weld. Alright, so now that everything is clean and it's ready to be welded, I'm going to go through and mark 1-inch intervals. I haven't seen anything that says what distance between each spot weld is the best, or if it'll change anything, but 1 inch is easy enough to see. It's easy to remember. You're not going like 1/2 or anything like that. You can just go 1 inch over and over again with a tape measure. And one thing that I've seen and I thought was a really good idea was Adele from Offbeat Garage recommended he was doing the inside when he said it, but a piece of sound deadening, or you can get a piece of paper or cardboard or anything like that, cut it to where it's only 1 inch long, and then on some of these pieces like here and some of these tighter areas where you can't get a tape measure in, you can easily make your 1 inch marks. So I'm going to start doing that.
And if you go to the so-called Negro here in America and ask him his name, he doesn't know it. If a Chinese person came through that door and I asked him his name and he said his name was Patrick.
Alright guys, so this is pretty much what it's going to look like when you're ready to go. You can see everything is marked 1 inch apart, all cleaned up and ready to be welded. You can go obviously a lot more in depth with it. Like I'm not taking out my brake lines and things like that just because I don't feel like doing it. But you can even see I'm doing where the frame rails connect to the frame, or this front part. Yeah, so now on to the other side. Alright guys, so this is what it ended up looking like after it was all said and done. See the tops, then the back, the bottom, and the frame rails. All welded up. Had to touch up. I ran out of primer, so I had to use some black paint, but all in all, I think it came out pretty good. Oh hey, thanks for sticking around after the credits. You know I couldn't just leave it boring stitch welded, so I had to put these custom bomb gussets in. I'll show you those in a second, but thanks for hanging out. Like, comment, subscribe, all that. Thanks guys.